We finally made it. UFC 282, a card that I'd argue is as stacked, if not more stacked, than UFC 280 that we had in October. UFC 282 is from top to bottom. Every fight is exciting. Every fight is a must watch. Every fight is going to be good. And this is all taking place in a day. Tomorrow is when this fight is finally going to take place. Obviously, it would have been way nicer to see Yuri Prohaska and Glover Teixeira have that rematch, but it seems like that fight is probably not going to happen ever, maybe. But this video is not about them. We're going to talk about Jan Blachowicz and Magomed Ankalaev. They're gonna throw down at T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas tomorrow night, December 10th. And I haven't had much content about this fight. It's because, or this card, just, I went on vacation and then I came back and it's December, so we got to start studying for midterms. I got a lot of tests to take before midterms. I got a lot of homeworks or just things to study or work on. And, it's just schedules have not been super easy. I've been missing sleep. I've been missing days of school. It's something I'm working on, but I'm hoping this weekend I actually get to recover on some sleep, and I'm hoping that right now I get to make some accurate predictions, because we're gonna start with Eric Silva versus TJ Brown. They're gonna fight in the featherweight division. Yeah, featherweight division. And I don't think it was Eric Silva that missed weight. I think Daniel De Silva missed weight, and the fight got scrapped. This one at the bottom here. Actually, let me actually refresh that page, let me refresh this one also, because I had these open for a while. So, Eric King Silva, who is messaging me at this time? Okay, never mind. Eric King Silva, 9-1 record in MMA. He started out his career in the Contender Series, his UFC career in the Contender Series. He is making his debut this weekend against TJ Brown. TJ Brown is someone who has the same amount of losses as Eric Silva has wins, which is pretty interesting. 16-9, downtown TJ Brown. I've actually seen one of this guy's fights before. I forgot which one. It was the Charles Rosa fight, I think. No, it was this one. The one in June. He's coming off of a loss, unanimous decision. If you look at his last 6 fights, he is 3-3. His last 4 fights have all come by, loss by unanimous, win by split, win by unanimous, loss by unanimous. He's 1-1 this year, and by the looks of his his past few fights, it doesn't look like he's super exciting at this point in his career. Obviously, before he joined the UFC, he had a lot of first round, second round submissions. He's pretty good at that entire submission game. But you look at Eric Silva, a guy who's also pretty good at the submission game. But the only difference between them both is Eric Silva's getting submissions now, this year, and in the past few months. TJ Brown hasn't gotten a submission win since 2019. So, just based on that, and because Eric Silva is Venezuelan, Latino, I got to give the win to Eric Silva, and I think he gets it done in the second round by submission. That's my prediction for this fight. We're going to go into Billy Quarantillo. People call him Quarantello, but Quarantillo looks like more Hispanic, versus Alexander Hernandez. We're going to look at both of their fighter pages. We're going to try to get through these predictions quicker, because I'm not trying to have another 56-minute prediction video like my last one for Orlando. But Billy Quarantillo, 16-4 in his pro career, 4-2 in the UFC. He's coming off of a loss to Shane Burgos a year ago, actually over a year ago. It's like 13 months ago, to Shane Burgos on the Usman Covington 2 undercard. That was his last fight, so he might have a little bit of ring rust there. Then we look at the Great Ape, Alexander Hernandez, coming off of a loss to Renato Moicano in UFC 281 undercard this year in February. If we look at his, okay, I was contemplating talking about Alexander Hernandez's past or not. We're gonna delve into Alexander Hernandez a little bit more. When he first joined the UFC, he was 8-1. He had the hype train after beating Beneil Dariush before Dariush had a big name for himself. He was then on a 2-fight UFC winning streak. He was on a way bigger winning streak in his professional career. Then he went on to fight Donald Cerrone. With all this hype behind him, he ended up trash talking Cerrone, saying he would kind of like, you guys got to watch the interviews yourself, but kept calling Cerrone an old man and saying that he was going to put Cerrone to like retirement and this and that, make him rethink his career. Cerrone ended up taking Hernandez to school, and since then, it's just not been the same for him, trading wins and losses. But I think the big difference for these two is the people they fought. Now, neither of these guys have crazy wins against any crazy opponents, but when it comes down to who they fought, Billy Quarantillo's craziest fight was probably Shane Burgos, which was last year. It was his most recent fight as well. Alexander Hernandez, he's hasn't won against anybody super crazy except for Beneil Dariush, but that was back when he wasn't at his best years yet. He was still an unknown guy at this time in 2018. He was not super huge guy. I think he was ranked, but he definitely wasn't as big as or as skilled as he was now. So if we're gonna look at recently, we could talk about Drew Dober, who was ranked before, Thiago Moises, who's also fought a lot of big lightweight guys, who has that experience. Renato Moicano, who's ranked today at number 13. I think when it comes down to both of their resumes of who they fought, not of who they've beat, but who they fought, I think Alexander Hernandez is more prepared than Quarantillo is. So where that takes me is that'll take me to giving the win to Hernandez. I think he takes it not by anything crazy. It might be a somewhat close decision, but I've got it by unanimous decision still. So we're going to move on to Chris Curtis and Joaquin Buckley. I think, yeah, they're a prelim. Now, which one's the... I think this is the featured early prelim. Let me check. No, this was the... Hernandez was the featured early prelim. So we're going to start the prelims with Chris Curtis versus Joaquin Buckley. And this is a good fight. This is a fight that's close on a lot of people's... predictions. Both guys are similar in size, similar in just in kind of hype trains, similar in experience as well. A lot of things about them are kind of similar, except for their age. Chris Curtis is 7 years older than Joaquin Buckley. And if we look at both of their recent fights or last fights, Joaquin Buckley is 5-3. Chris Curtis is 3-1. His first loss in the UFC came in July in UFC London to Jack Hermanson. It was by unanimous decision, so obviously not too bad. Fun fact, Chris Curtis was in the corner of Roman Dolidze when Dolidze submitted Jack Hermanson in the second round just last week, so I think that's kind of funny. We look into his most recent fights. He's had 2 fights this year. He's 1-1 this year. He is ranked number 15 currently. He was number 14 before Dolidze shot up in the rankings to number 8. That also ended up kicking Brad Tavares out of the rankings. We look at Joaquin Buckley. He is coming off of a similar style loss to Nasruddin Imavov. Unanimous decision loss. It was in UFC Paris. UFC Paris in September. So now they're going to fight for that ranked spot at middleweight. And who do I think is going to win this fight? It's a pretty exciting matchup. Very exciting fight between very exciting fighters. I think it's definitely a hard fight to call. Joaquin Buckley has what it takes to win this fight. Chris Curtis has what it takes to keep his rankings or his ranking. Joaquin Buckley, these are two guys that definitely should be in the top 15 of the division, but middleweight right now is just so packed, in my opinion. It's so packed with such high level talent. I feel like it's definitely right now it's hard for a middleweight to get by in the UFC. But who do I think is gonna take this fight? Even though this is a hard one to decide, I'll just say Chris Curtis off of more experience, more fights, and obviously the fact that he's ranked instead of Joaquin Buckley. I think it's just has something to do with it. I think he has bigger wins or better fights. Joaquin Buckley obviously had that fight with Kevin Holland that gives him that somewhat experience, but that was in 2020. He hasn't fought super big guys since then. He fought Jordan Wright, which is pretty good. That's a decent win. Then Nasruddin Imavov. But I think that Chris Curtis is just more likely to take it, even though, well, I may very well be wrong. Joaquin Buckley could not easily, but it's very possible that it just slips by and he's able to take it. I think it'll be by decision, unanimous decision, probably a really close unanimous decision. Maybe split decision is possible, but I got Chris Curtis taking that. Now we move on to Edmen Shabazian and Dalka Lungyambula. I think that's how you say his name. So Dalka, what country is that actually? That's a map I haven't seen before. DR of the Congo. Nice. So the Golden Boy Edmen Shabazian versus Dalka. We're gonna look at Dalka's record first. He's 11-5. He's 2-4 in the UFC. Not super good. He's coming off of a 3-fight losing streak. He's 0-2 this year. He hasn't won a fight since January of 2021. So that's a while back. Yeah, so he lost by decision, and then he lost by submission, and then he lost by knockout. So increasingly, it's just gotten worse. And so now that you're going to put him against an opponent that people actually know, like Edmen Shabazian, while he's on this losing streak against people that aren't super well known to the public, it's not a good look for Dalka, in my opinion. I think Edmen Shabazian is more likely to win. He's 11-3 right now. Edmen Shabazian had a very big hype train when as he went on in the UFC. He just slowly built up his hype train more and more. Obviously, it was very derailed when he lost to Derek Brunson, and it was even more derailed when he lost to Jack Hermanson and then Nasruddin Imavov. As it went on, he hasn't fought in 13 months. He's got that ring rust right now, while Dalka doesn't have too much ring rust. I think this was the Ortega Rodriguez undercard in July. So even though the ring rust is there for Edmen Shabazian, I still think he has a very high chance of taking this fight. You know, these guys are both on 3-fight losing streaks, but when you look at who they've lost to in these 3-fight losing streaks, you talk about number 13 Imavov, number 9 Jack Hermanson, number 4 Derek Brunson, or number 5 Derek Brunson, and unranked guys who I only know the names of one of them, Cody Brundage. So who do I think takes this one in the end? I think Edmen Shabazian comfortably takes it by KO, TKO in the second round. Just some kind of finish in the second round. I think it's more likely to happen. We're going to move on to Jairzinho Rozenstruik versus Chris Daukaus. Now, I think this was a pretty easy one to call as well. Chris Daukaus, he's 4-2 in the UFC. He's had his first 2 losses recently. They were his most recent fights. He lost to Curtis Blaydes and Derek Lewis, so they're not super big losses to his career in the sense of they're both... Or Curtis Blaydes right now is a top 5 guy, but Derek Lewis is a title challenger, former title challenger. So, you know, Chris Daukaus, he's still got wins over people like Nascimento, Olenek, and Abdurakimov. It's these Dagestani names. They're hard to pronounce, but it's all good. Yeah, he made his debut in 2020. Since then, he's gone 4-2 in his last 6. He's on a 2-fight losing streak. I already said that. We're gonna move on to Jairzinho Biggie Boy Rozenstruik. He's 6-4 in the UFC. He's also on a 2-fight losing streak to Volkov and Curtis Blaydes. The Volkov fight was an early stoppage, but that doesn't take away the fact that it was still in the first round. So before that, he beat Augusto Sakai, but then he lost to Cyril Gane, beat Junior Dos Santos, but also lost to Francis Ngannou, and then beat Alistair Overeem and Andrei Arlovski. This guy's just kind of been recently in the past few years, just been trading wins and losses, but he has only fought the top guys in the division, obviously. So what does that say about both of these guys? Well, they both fought different opponents besides the Curtis Blades fight. I think at that point it would just come down to who is just more skilled or more disciplined or has more heart, because this is a heavyweight fight. I don't think this is going to make it past the first round either. These guys are both just skilled heavy hitters. It's somewhat tough to call. I think either one of them could take it because it is a heavyweight fight where they're just going to be standing and banging, but I think Jairzinho Rozenstruik has a slight edge. I think he wins by knockout in the first round. And if not Rozenstruik, then Dawkins wins by knockout in the first round. But I have Rozenstruik because I think he'll get it done quicker. We're going to move on to Jay Perrin versus Raul Rosas Jr., El Niño Problema. He's 18 years old, still a kid, not still a kid, he's an adult now. But when he made his kind of debut on the Contender Series, he was still a kid. He was only 5-0 at the time. He was going against Manu Gutierrez, who was 7-1. So it's not like a terrible guy to go against. It was very possible that he could lose that fight. Manu Gutierrez being also, I think he was 7 or 8 years older at the time. And now he's making his UFC debut this year. Jay Perrin, a bit more experienced, 10-6. He is 0-2 in the UFC, however. He made his debut this year in February against Mario Bautista, lost by unanimous decision. He had another fight on the Usman-Edwards rematch undercard against this guy. I don't want to pronounce that name. I don't want to butcher it. I don't want to attempt to say that, but yeah, it's just not a good look for him right now. The 2-fight losing streak. He's 0-2 in the UFC, 0-2 in Bellator, 0-2 or 0-1 on the Contender Series. It's not a super good look for Jay Perrin right now, especially at the weigh-ins today. He was trash talking Raul Rosas Jr. I think Raul is not going to hold anything back in this fight. They've both got pretty good jiu-jitsu backgrounds. Obviously, this guy hasn't really gotten too many submission wins in the recently. I mean, in the past, he's gotten a lot. He gets a lot of rear naked choke wins, a lot of guillotine choke wins, just a lot of choke wins in general. He hasn't had a submission win since 2021. He hasn't had a win since 2021 either. Raul Rosas Jr. still undefeated professionally in MMA. He mixes it up with his submissions. He doesn't just do chokes. He gets arm bars, and he also gets chokes. He can switch it up in his game. We've seen, or I've seen more of what he can do other than Jay Perrin. And who do I think gets it done? I think Raul Rosas Jr. will end up outclassing Jay Perrin on the ground. I think it could be a submission in the second round. That's my prediction. But it also could be a decision win. It's very possible, but I think Raul Rosas will make a statement in this fight just because he has to. On the Contender Series, it's like as long as you just get the contract, then it's all good. But to make that statement, and since he already has a very, very nice hype train, I think he's got to get that finish in order to keep it going. And I think that's just what fate has in store for Raul Rosas Jr. in this featured prelim. So I wish him the best of luck. I'm rooting for him in this fight. And we're going to move on to Bryce Mitchell and Ilia Topuria. This is the fans' main event. This is such an incredible fight. All the stars aligned for this fight to happen. Edson Barbosa pulled out in his fight against Ilia Topuria that was supposed to take place a few months ago. And Bryce Mitchell had Movsar Evloev pull out of their fight that was supposed to take place a month ago. And that pretty much put them on a collision course to fight each other on this stacked pay-per-view. And it was way better for both of their careers in the end. Or maybe for one of them, because one of them is going to walk out with a loss with no more undefeated record. So Bryce Mitchell, He's 6-0 in the UFC. Ilia Topuria 4-0 in the UFC. These guys are the new age of UFC fighters. They're that new generation, kind of not the new generation. They're just that new wave of fighters that they're gonna be popular. In 2, 5, 10 years, they're gonna be the guys that are at the top of the sport. Kind of like right now, you see the poster boys of the UFC. That's what these guys are. Bryce Mitchell and Ilia Topuria. That's them. So to have them fight each other this early on in their careers is a pretty crazy move by the UFC. It's a daring move, but it might work out for them in the end. They could have a killer rematch in the future, but we gotta look at their records and who they've beat. Bryce Mitchell coming off of a win in the UFC 272 fight against Edson Barbosa, who Ilia Topuria was supposed to fight. He's beaten Andre Fili. He's beaten Charles Rosa. So he has decent wins, His wins aren't too bad. He's on a 15-fight winning streak right now. He's on a 6-fight winning streak in the UFC. He's only had 6 fights in the UFC. Same with Ilia Topuria, 12-fight winning streak, undefeated, 4-fight winning streak in the UFC, 4 fights in the UFC. He's coming off of some crazy wins. He's coming off of an insane win against Jai Herbert back in March on a UFC fight night. Brutal knockout. Ryan Hall, insane knockout. Damon Jackson, just some very, very impressive wins throughout his career, and especially in the UFC. He's definitely made a name for himself after becoming ranked in only 4 UFC fights is pretty impressive as well. And obviously he was supposed to fight Edson Barbosa. That was supposed to give him more credibility, but now he's jumping the ship in a way in fighting Bryce Mitchell. So at that point, who wins, Thug Nasty or El Matador? And maybe this is just because I like the guy more, but it's also because here's the thing. There's a very possible chance Bryce Mitchell just wrestles his way into a unanimous decision, just makes it a boring fight. But I think Ilia Topuria has some very underrated ground game. He's gotten submissions before, submission, anaconda choke, mounted guillotine, rear naked. This guy is also skilled on the ground. He came from grappling, as he said before, so I don't think he's worried about that. I'm not super worried about that, but it's always going to be up in the air. Who do I think is going to win? I think Topuria is going to win. I'm gonna just go for it. I'm gonna go for the gamble. I'll say first round knockout. I don't think he takes it to the ground, and I think Bryce Mitchell will probably, if it goes on for too long, Bryce Mitchell might take him to the ground and keep it kind of a ground fight. And if that does happen, Ilia Topuria, I think he would try to find ways to find some kind of submissions. He's gotten impressive submissions before, obviously, as you've seen here. Mostly chokes, but it's still something. So that's my prediction. Very daring prediction, but I'ma just go for it. Now this is a very, very interesting fight here. We got Darren Till versus Dricus du Plessis. I saw this fight coming from a mile away. For many months now, I thought, yeah, these two, they're gonna fight some point in the future. I just knew it, and now it's finally happening. Very excited for this fight. It's something that, when you think of something happening for so long, it's just when it finally does get confirmed to you, like, yes, this is happening, and then when it actually does happen, it's a good feeling inside of you. The Gorilla Darren Till versus Still Knox Dricus du Plessis, undefeated in the UFC, 17-2. Darren Till on a 2-fight losing streak. He's 4-2 in his last 6. He's coming off of loss to Derek Brunson last year. How many months ago was this? This was like 15 or 14 months ago. So that ring rust is probably there. Obviously, he was going to fight Jack Hermanson in UFC London. Had to pull out due to an injury. And he also got injured in this camp. He got an eye injury. If you saw the pictures, you could look them up if you want, but they're kind of brutal pictures. Definitely don't look at those if you're eating, but he was able to pull through. His eyes looking much better, and he decided not to pull out, which If you look at some of his fights in 2020 and 2021, you just see pull out to Robert Whittaker, pull out to Jack Hermanson, to Vettori, to Brunson. Even if he ended up fighting some of these guys, still the pullouts are there, and obviously it was very frustrating for Darren Till fans that just wanted to see him fight, and it was also frustrating the losing streaks, the Masvidal knockout, the Whittaker and Derek Brunson setbacks, the Woodley setback also. That was not good for his career at all. It was his first loss ever professionally. So that's a little background to his career. We look at Dricus du Plessis. He's coming off of a win against Brad Tavares. He's had a lot of canceled fights as well, actually, looking back at this. He was supposed to fight Kelvin Gastelum, fight that got scheduled on April Fool's Day. Obviously, that is a cursed day in MMA because Dricus stepped in and then Gastelum had to pull out because Dricus was stepping on an injured opponent, but then Gastelum ended up pulling out anyways. Cursed day in general because that all happened in one day. So he was also supposed to fight Anthony Hernandez on this card. I don't know. A lot of these fights fizzled out. He was supposed to fight Chris Curtis as well. Something happened to Dricus du Plessis on this, but he never ended up fighting on this card. So we look at his career. He's had 3 fights across 3 years, one in 2020, 2021, then another one in 2022. 2 of them have been on pay-per-view events. One of them was a knockout win. One of them was another knockout win. And then he went to a unanimous decision win against Brad Tavares, who is now unranked. He fell out of the rankings last week, and du Plessis was able to hold on to his ranking at number 14. So how do I think this fight is going to go after that little background between both of them? Honestly, I don't know who I want to win. I kind of like both these guys. It'd be nice to see Darren Till come back, but if it's against someone ranked below him, it's not the craziest thing. But even then, I still think du Plessis takes that win. My bad. How do I think he takes it? Just got to look back at his career. This guy, if you look at his UFC career, you think of him as more of a striker, not a super ground-focused kind of guy or ground-based kind of guy. But look at his past. Even though this was many, many years ago, he has a lot of chokes under his on his resume. Just a lot of wins by chokes, guillotines, rear naked chokes, guillotines. Obviously, once he leveled up his striking, he was able to use that more, and that's just what he's using more now. But I feel like if he has a smart training camp, which I'm pretty sure he does, he's going to use his all-around skills to his advantage. I think the same way Tyron Woodley was able to do it, I think Dricus du Plessis is going to try to take it to the ground somehow and maybe get a submission there. So I'm going to take the gamble. I'm going to take Dricus du Plessis by submission instead of by knockout or by decision. I was going to say second round, but I want to say third round once Darren Till is maybe kind of tired out. But it's very possible. It's possible for Darren Till to get a win. It's possible for this fight not to go to a submission, but I'm going to just take the route that many people are not taking. I'm going to take the one that's less likely, see if I get some kind of, a prediction that not many people are predicting is what I'm trying to say. So now we move on to Santiago Ponzinibbio versus Alex Morono, which this is the third fight. This is the third fight only because Ponzinibbio was supposed to fight Robbie Lawler, and since he had to pull out, I don't think they wanted to bump Ponzinibbio down. Plus, he's a fun fighter anyway, so I'm glad that he kind of stayed on the main card and kept his spot as well. It's gonna be good for more people to get to know some of these fighters like Alex Morono or like Ponzinibbio, who are somewhat veterans of the game. They have a lot of fights in general. They have a lot of fights in the UFC as well. Santiago Ponzinibbio got knocked off of the rankings a few months back. Alex Morono is someone who is currently on the rise. He is 11-4 in the UFC. Ponzinibbio is 10-5. So you look at his last 2 wins. He's on a 2-fight losing streak. They were both by split decision. The Michel Pereira fight split decision loss. That's the one that booted him off the rankings. The Jeff Neal split decision loss. I'd take that as a W because Jeff Neal is, I mean, he's on a rampage right now in the division. So you got to give them both some credit, I guess. You look at Alex Morono. He's had one fight this year. He won it. It was on the Payne Nunes rematch undercard. I saw this fight. It was a nice fight. He also beat Mickey Gall. He's beaten Donna Cerrone. This was just in the last 2 years. He is 4-0 in the last 2 years. He's 5-1 in his last 6. And I think an Alex Morono win is very possible. He's on a 3-fight unanimous decision winning streak. Santiago Ponzinibbio, a 2-fight split decision losing streak. Like, I don't know. I've seen a lot more Ponzinibbio fights. I think he's beaten way more impressive guys. Like Sean Strickland, even though that was in 2015, that's still a pretty funny win to have on your record. He's beaten Gunnar Nelson, Mike Perry, Neil Magny. Even if recently he's kind of fallen off, I still have belief in him and in his ability. Even though Alex Morono, I think a lot is stacked in his favor, but he's also taking this fight on very short notice, like less than a week's notice. I think that'll have a lot to do with it. It's also at a catch weight 180 pounds kind of fight. So who do I think is going to win? Alex Morono's got a good chance. There's a very high chance that Alex Morono wins, but I want to take Ponzinibbio, and I want to take Ponzinibbio by split decision just to combat this, all of this. I'm going to take Ponzinibbio by split decision. If only this fight was scheduled from the start, because Ponzinibbio, Raleigh Lawler, it was scheduled for many months now. I mean, people knew this fight was going to happen for a long time. On December 10th, for a long time. I think it was the first fight announced for December 10th. So Ponzinibbio has been training for a long, long time. Alex Morono has been training maybe a week for this fight at least. So even though his record is more impressive and all that, I think Ponzinibbio right now is just out for blood. I think he's going to manage to get this win back just because Alex Morono has not had the full proper training camp. Obviously, if he did, then I'd pick Morono. Easy win. Not easy win, but I'd pick him, I'd put money on him. A lot of money is what I'm saying. But because of just the difference in times and of preparing and all that, I have to pick Ponzinibbio. I just think that's more likely to happen. And if Morono ends up winning, then that'll show a lot about his fighting ability. So, I mean, we'll just see. We'll see what happens in that fight. It's a toss-up in my opinion. Now we move on to the fight which a lot of people are looking forward to the most: Paddy Pimblett versus Jared Gordon. Paddy Pimblett 19-3, 3-0 in the UFC, 3-fight winning streak in the UFC. He's 5-1 in his last 6. He's coming off of a win against Jordan Levitt, second round rear naked choke. And I want this big advertisement to go because it's kind of getting in the way. So we're going to look at Jared Gordon, who's 19-5, 7-4 in the UFC, a bit more of an experienced guy. He's coming off a win against Leonardo Santos in the Usman Edwards 2 undercard. He's had 2 fights this year. He's 1-1 this year. He lost against Grant Dawson in the last minute of that fight by a rear naked choke. This was on the Chito Vera versus Rob Font undercard back in April. I remember that. So Jared Gordon, obviously being the more experienced guy, but I see some people, like even Gilbert Burns, they've said that Jared Gordon would win that fight. There's been a few people online saying, yeah, Jared Gordon's probably got this just by experience, but you look at their actual records. Jared Gordon 19-5. Paddy Pimblett is 19-3. Like, Paddy Pimblett not only has a better record, but he has the same amount of wins and less losses. So it's gonna say a lot about Paddy Pimblett. You look at Jared Gordon's wins recently: unanimous, split, unanimous. You look at his losses: rear naked choke, overhand right, a knockout loss in the first round, punches in the first round. Like, you look at Paddy Pimblett's recent losses, there's not many. There's one unanimous and another one unanimous. And then since then, it's just been wins. knockout win in the first, and then a choke and a choke. Like Paddy Pimblett has been on it, and it's been against Jordan Levitt. That's a pretty good win as well. So I think I don't think it's a good idea to kind of downplay someone's skills. Like maybe Jared Gordon comes out and he is way more skilled than a lot of people give him credit to actually be. But I think stylistically, realistically, and kind of just it needing to be this outcome, I think Paddy Pimblett has to win. He genuinely has to win this fight. Everything is on the line for him. He is one of the top guys in terms of hype in the UFC right now. He's one of Dana White's favorite guys. He's gonna be a future poster boy. All he needs to do is win this fight. If he loses this fight, I think it's over for him. Honestly, for him to lose this early in his career with all this hype, it's a lot of pressure. But Paddy Pimblett is very, very good at handling a lot of pressure. He comes back through adversity. We saw it in the Vendramini fight. We've seen it in many of his other fights where he almost gets knocked out, but ends up coming back and performing decently well. I think Paddy Pimblett does take that fight. I think he takes it by second round submission like he did to Jordan Levitt. I just think once it goes to the ground, Paddy Pimblett has said before that he has tapped out Jared Gordon twice. Jared Gordon said that it's not true. I don't know who to believe, but I guess we're just gonna find out on Saturday night who is telling the truth. But I think Paddy Pimblett gets it done just because he has to, and he most likely will. Now the main event: Jan Blachowicz and Magomed Ankalaev. And this is a fight that at first how do I say it? I would have had all my money on Magomed Ankalaev at the start. But as it's gone on, as I've kept rethinking this fight, as I've seen more of their past fights, I'm starting to think a Jan Blachowicz win is more likely than I first anticipated. And I said it in that previous video 2 weeks ago when Yuri Prohaska pulled out. I said that Jan Blachowicz will win this fight. I can't tell you guys how, but he will win this fight. And I'm starting to very much believe it. I mean, think about it. Jan Blachowicz. Nah, you guys don't even have to think about this. Everybody's been telling it to you, and you just want them to stop saying it. It's just the legendary Polish power. You want people to stop talking to you about it because it's brought up so often. Like, oh my God, this guy has such crazy legendary Polish power. But it's true. Jan Blachowicz has knocked out so many guys. He knocked out Dominic Reyes, which isn't a super big win. It hasn't aged well as of, because he also got knocked out by Yuri and by Ryan Spann recently. He is on a 4-fight losing streak, 3-fight knockout losing streak. He knocked out Corey Anderson. He knocked out Luke Rockhold, which also isn't a super crazy win either. But you can't deny his power either way. Jan Blachowicz does have really good power, but someone else who's really skilled on the feet also is Magomed Ankalaev. 9-1 in the UFC. He has not lost a fight since 2018, which was his UFC debut. Since then, he's gone on a 9-fight winning streak professionally and in the UFC. He's coming off of wins against Ion Cutelaba, Nikita Krylov, Volkan Ozdemir, Thiago Santos, Anthony Smith. Just with every fight, it keeps getting just a tougher and tougher and tougher opponent. And as each fight goes on, it just seems to get easier and easier and easier. Besides the Cutelaba fights, obviously. But he definitely showed up for the Anthony Smith fight. He performed very, very well in that fight. Jan Blachowicz, his last fight was in May. It was against Alexander Rakic. I had Jan Blachowicz losing that fight. Believe it or not, I didn't think he was just performing super well. But obviously, the leg injury happened, and Jan Blachowicz got to keep a spot in the rankings, while Magomed took Rakic's spot after he beat Anthony Smith. So what happens from here? I think, and it's tough to choose. Jan Blachowicz last few wins, he lost to Glover Teixeira, but before that it was beat Israel Adesanya. Then it was knocked out Dominic Reyes, knocked out Anderson, split decision against Jacare, but then knocked out Luke Rockhold as well. The Thiago Santos loss, I guess it is what it is. It was a few years ago still. Look at Magomed, it's just win after win after win after. I mean, most of these guys would be ranked. Besides Kutulaba, Krylov is ranked. Ozdemir is ranked. Thiago Santos would be ranked if he was still in the UFC. Anthony Smith is ranked as well. And even though most of these wins have been unanimous decisions, it doesn't take away from these fights and these insane knockouts. Same goes for Jan. I mean, this was before his career resurgence when he started getting more and more and more wins. These two have, besides the losing kind of skid from Jan, these two have had somewhat similar careers. This is a good matchup for both of them. Who do I think will win? It's one of the tougher ones. I think besides maybe Curtis Buckley and Topuria Mitchell, this is one of the closest fights to call, which many people disagree with me with because they think Ankalaev will sweep Jan Blachowicz. And while I don't think he'll sweep Blachowicz, I think he will win. I think he'll get some kind of standing TKO or some kind of... I think it'll be just some punches where the referee has to step in, and I think it'll be in a late round. Third, fourth, I don't think it'll be... Maybe it's possible that it'll be a fifth. But I think... Here's the thing. Jan Blachowicz is very, very likely to win. And I'm going to say it. When I review this card, I'm going to say it. If Jan Blachowicz does end up winning, I'm going to say why he was going to win that fight. But I don't know. Maybe it's just I got to go with the safe bet. Magomed Ankalaev by KO TKO. I'm just not sure about Jan Blachowicz at this time right now. I like him a lot. He's a very likable guy, funny guy, entertaining guy. But I think it's very safe to say that Magomed is just on his way to winning this. If Magomed wins this title and wins the fight, he'll be the fourth Dagestani guy to win a vacant UFC title. There hasn't been a single Russian guy recently that has won a title from somebody or from a current champion. Not from a current champion, from a champion at the time. That's a stat that I saw. They've all won belts that were vacated. Like Khabib won the vacant title against Iaquinta. Makhachev won the vacant title against Oliveira. And there was another one. I forgot who it was. Petr Yan won the vacant title as well. So, Magomed Ankalaev would be the fourth guy. And he would also be the second guy this year to do it too. So, who do I think is going to win? Ankalaev. What do I think of the card? I think it's going to be a very, very good card. I think it's going to be one of the best of the year. I think it's such a good pay-per-view to close out the year, honestly. I think it's either going to be full of knockouts or it's going to be full of wars or it's going to be just a perfect mix of the two. Honestly, if you look at Magomed's hair, it kind of looks like he has like dandruff. That's kind of nasty now, but yeah, that's just my preview of this card, my predictions, and if I'm kind of off, it's just because I'm just tired. I haven't gotten enough sleep, so I'm just trying to get this video out there, trying to get my predictions in, trying to submit them, trying to get my points on Typology, trying to get some of these right, because in my UFC Orlando predictions, I did not get a lot of those right. I'm trying to get back to my Lewis Spivak predictions where I got them all right. So, this is the third predictions video I've done on this channel on a UFC event. So it's also the first pay-per-view predictions I've done. So let's hope I get most of these right.